Bonus pod Saturday. Of course, as always, the DNVR Broncos podcast presented by Strava Craft Coffee. You can subscribe and save 20% off your Strava Craft coffee when you use the code DNVR. And honestly, if you subscribe, you get 20% off your coffee every single time you go and get yourself some Strava Craft coffee. So get in on that now. Go into Strava Craft Coffee, subscribe, and save 20% off. They'll send you to that CBD-infused, rich, tasty coffee, and it will be delicious. So make sure you subscribe to Strava Craft Coffee today. All right, welcome in to the DNVR Broncos podcast, live if you're tuning in. If not, thanks for tuning in through your podcast feeds. But this is, of course, presented by MSU Denver Online. They'll put a dynamic education at your fingertips and give you rigorous and affordable programs. And so you can get your degree that you've been thinking about. Never been a better time than now to go back to school and get that degree you've been wanting. But like I said, bonus pod Saturday. You know, there might not be, you might be listening to like an outdoor show on the radio, but here we're talking about the Broncos. And Zach is coming to you from training camp.
But first of all, it's not Saturday.
Whatever.
My boy
Sunday.
out here live from training camp, practice 2 just wrapping up. And guys, man, I was so excited to see Jerry Jeudy, Drew Lock, Courtland Sutton, this offense click and grind. And I didn't get to see much of that because what do you need in order to do that? You need time. And the defense was leaving no time for Drew Lock back there today.
That is very, I don't know. Let me ask you, Zach, is that exciting about the pass rush, or is that concerning about the offensive line?
Both, right? I mean, when I was watching practice, I was a little more concerned because the Broncos did some new things on the offensive line today. Of course, it was Schlottman getting the shot, man, on Friday at center. Today, Patrick Morris was the one getting the shot at center. And then on the right side, you had Elijah Wilkinson, who was pretty much the right tackle the entire practice. So Broncos doing some new things. And let's just say today, that was not the winning combo for the Broncos because pressure wasn't coming from Vaughn, wasn't coming from just Bradley Chubb. It wasn't just coming from Jarrell Casey. It wasn't just coming from Shelby Harris. It wasn't just coming from Mike Purcell. It wasn't just coming from A.J. Johnson. Kareem Jackson was in the mix too. I mean, guys, we're talking about the pass rush here. And I feel like I just named the entire Broncos defense talking about the pass rush. Vic Fangio today was dialing it up, not afraid to blitz. I'm sure Pat Shurmur right now is talking to Vic after practice saying, what the heck was that, man? This is practice 2.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a part of me that says it's good that you have this from the pass rush because what you can't have this season is the pass rush going 4 games without any big stuff, any sacks. You know, Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, it took them up to 4 games to get any sacks. So you got to get the pass rush going early this year. You want to see these guys show out in camp. The truth is, you know, Zach, you love talking about where the money is allocated. Those pass rushers are getting paid a hell of a lot more money than that offensive line is. So, you know, obviously you want to see that offensive line do their job, but you got to see that. You got to see that defensive line, that pass rush, show that they're worth all that money.
Yeah, you have to. And the defense did get some turnovers in Friday's practice. Today, they were focused on making life tough for Drew Lock. And I'll tell you what, Drew Lock handled the pressure pretty much as well as you could. But Ryan, the pressure was constant. And like I said, it was coming from everywhere. So most of the throws Drew was making were check downs, dump offs. Noah Fant had a lot of work today because he was just running a lot of drags where he was getting the ball dumped off to him. Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon. Drew was putting perfect touch to them over the defensive line. But that's about all there was until the very end of practice where Courtland Sutton got deep. He beat A.J. Boye, and Drew dropped in a 50-yard gem right over the shoulder. Courtland Sutton just strided into the end zone for a touchdown. Without a doubt, the play of the day on offense. And on defense, in terms of plays of the days, it was 2 out of every 3 plays there was just a great pass rush move, a great blitz coming in from the inside or the outside. But really one on offense that stuck out, and it was Drew to Sutton deep.
Okay, but before we move on, I brought this up earlier, but I guess I got cut off. You talked about how the blitzes were involved. So are we talking about 5-6-man blitzes? So they were throwing.
Oh no! Now we're losing Mace again. Frustrating. I think you saw where he was going there, Zach. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about 4-man pressures at times where you're just bringing Jarrell, Shelby, and then you got Vaughn and Chubb on the outside. Sometimes Jerry Itachu played a lot today, filling in for Chubb as Chubb's going to slowly be brought back. And Jerry Itachu did a good job. The guys in the middle did a good job. But then you were seeing Kareem Jackson and A.J. Johnson coming in the inside via blitz. So it wasn't really corner blitzes from the outside, and that makes sense, right? You don't really need pressure from the outside when you got Vaughn and Chubb on the outside. So it was a lot of inside pressure, and I mean, good way to take advantage of rotating centers because Patrick Morris was a center all day today. We still haven't seen Lloyd Cushenberry work with the ones yet. He was getting some time with the twos. I wouldn't be shocked if when you're out here tomorrow, Ryan, you're seeing Lloyd Cushenberry get time with the ones, and it'll just be a cycle of those guys. And so Patrick Morris, tough day for him today, along with the rest of the offensive line. But Vic Fangio was serving up a tough plate too.
Yeah, and so that, can you quickly, for the people who are just tuning in, go over what the starting offensive line was again today?
Yeah, on the left side, of course, Garrett Bowles, Dalton Reisner at left guard, Patrick Morris at center. Right guard, you had Graham Glasgow. And then you did have Elijah Wilkinson pretty much getting the bulk of the time at right tackle today. So that's kind of what we expected with Elijah to start camp. But then we didn't necessarily see that on Friday. We saw him getting some time, but then him also rotating in and out today. It was pretty much Elijah on the right side. Not sure if that's going to stick moving forward, if they're going to try to keep that continuity with Elijah on the right side, or if they're going to continue to rotate that out. But from what is clear is center is not close to being decided.
Does that give you a little bit of confidence or make you feel a little bit better? Because in my opinion, that means the Broncos had 2 out of 5, 40% of the offensive line today was backups.
Yeah, exactly. And that could make you feel a little better. But Ryan, at what point are you going to let Drew start clicking with the offensive line? Drew start clicking with Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. Drew get comfortable back there, because what I don't want to see is it take the Broncos 3 weeks to figure out what their offensive line is. And then once you figure out what the offensive line is, none of it has had time to click. So I want that to happen soon. And then I can kind of forget a little bit more about today in terms of just how much pressure there was in Drew's face.
So we have a question here from our guy Tobias Meyer, and he wants to know what happened with KJ Hamler at the end of the practice. You saw him, Zach, I saw from your Twitter feed, just kind of walk off slowly with a trainer.
Yeah, exactly. It was during a special teams period, and KJ just slowly, gingerly walked off the field. Wasn't being assisted by a trainer, but did go back, left practice about 10 minutes early, and talked to a source after practice, and they said KJ's fine, just a little tweaked up. He should be ready to go again tomorrow. So nothing to worry about. It was a little nerve-wracking to see him walking off practice early, but nothing is wrong there from what I'm told.
All right. Sounds good. Great to hear there, Zach. I saw a little highlight that got posted to Twitter of KJ Hamler doing Devontae Harris dirty. Was there any more of that out there today?
That was the best one for sure. But Devontae Harris, speaking of him, he had a more notable day than KJ Hamler, because Devontae Harris got some time with the ones today, and he was a beast against Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton started off practice really slow. Dropped a pass, then Devontae Harris broke up 2 passes that hit Courtland Sutton's hands. Really impressed by Devontae Harris, but then Courtland Sutton picked up. He ended the day with the most catches from Drew Lock, and of course the 50-yard touchdown near the very end of practice. But KJ Hamler, still kind of they're playing it by the book with him. He was still going with the twos for the most part, but Ryan, Jerry Jeudy. Mace gave us the stellar report on Jerry Jeudy on Friday's practice, and Vic Fangio said, "I've seen enough. I don't have to wait any longer. I'm going to let Jerry Jeudy play with the ones." So we almost saw what Jerry Jeudy's role is going to be in with this offense, and it's playing inside, it's playing outside, it's going deep, it's doing everything. He was doing everything today with Drew Lock, and despite this being their first practice really throwing together with the full team, Drew was looking Jerry's way often, and so I was really impressed with that. Jerry getting open a lot. In fact, on one route, he got so open. This was against the twos where the ball was underthrown severely. Jerry wasn't anywhere close to catching it, and it was picked off and taken back for a touchdown the other way. But that one wasn't Jerry's fault. He created too much separation where the defender was so far off him that he was able to pick the route.
Yeah, the conversation with Mace the other day was about how much he was playing with the ones. We obviously all thought he should be playing more with the ones. Did you get that feel today that that the Broncos agreed with us?
Without a doubt. Jerry Jeudy was in there from the beginning of practice all the way to the end. And what I like to see is at the very end of practice, when practice reps are the most important, it was Jerry Jeudy who was on the field. Now, what we saw a lot of today, because like I said, KJ Hamler wasn't getting much time in there with the ones today, you had a lot of Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Tim Patrick. Now, when that was the case, Jerry Jeudy was your guy in the slot. But then also, like I said, even with the ones, Jerry Jeudy was playing outside.
Love to hear it. You love to hear it. Obviously, Tim Patrick, also a guy who is, I guess, fighting for that spot. And there's been some made. I saw our friend Benjamin Albright talking about how he was getting a lot of work over there. How did he look?
Tim Patrick looks solid. Like you expect Tim Patrick to look. Nothing incredible today, but he's a guy who knows what he has to do and is going to do just that. Whereas Courtland Sutton is going to make the incredible plays. Jerry Jeudy's always going to be open. Tim Patrick's a reliable guy. All
right, what else do we need to know from today's practice? Maybe give us you mentioned Devontae Harris is a guy who had a nice practice. Any other, dark horse guys out there who stood out to you?
How about Albert O? Now, not necessarily because he had a great practice. In fact, a pass went right off his hands that ended up being intercepted. But he was getting some play with the ones. And you wonder if they're saying, we only have 3 weeks of training camp. We're going to need chemistry to click right away. And we know that Albert O has that chemistry with Drew Lock. So that could really help him get more playing time come the season, despite being a 4th round pick, despite being the 3rd string tight end on the roster right now.
Wow. That's really interesting. I mean, obviously he comes in with as much, if not more, chemistry with Drew Lock than anyone can say. And I think early on, you're seeing that Courtland Sutton's chemistry that he built with Drew Lock last year is showing out there as Drew's kind of looking for him maybe more than the rest of his squad. And from the second the Broncos drafted Albert Okwuegbunam, I thought to myself, this is genius. And usually you see teams do this when they draft a rookie, a young quarterback. I expected the Broncos to bring in Emmanuel Hall last year, who was one of, if not Drew Lock's favorite receiver at Missouri. And I love that they did this year because it just makes guys feel a little bit more comfortable. Drew Lock has thrown hundreds, thousands, maybe even more than that of passes towards Albert Okwuegbunam. And when he sees him out there on the field, it just gives him a level of comfort. When he sees him around, it just gives him a level of comfort. And I assume when they drafted him, that was their thought process. And I assume that's their thought process now, putting him out there with the ones.
Yeah, exactly. And especially we've been talking to Vic Fangio the past day or on Friday, and he just said how there's no waiting around. The urgency is there. And that's a huge advantage for Alberto, having that connection already, especially with the team with so many new guys. And speaking of new guys, another guy, Ryan, kind of a dark horse today, Levante Bellamy. I mentioned Drew Lock was facing tons of pressure, but Draymond Jones and all the backups were getting so much pressure on Jeff Driscoll and Brett Rippon too, that all they could do was either throwing completions or dump it out of the backfield to the running backs. And Levante Bellamy, who Mace said struggled catching passes a couple days ago, was on fire today. Nothing brilliant, but consistent and counted on. And he was making the plays out of the backfield and then taking them upfield. So Levante Bellamy really stood out as the third running back on this team, running with the backups today.
Maybe he read my report then.
Exactly.
Mace, we got you back now. Hopefully we get to keep you in here. You got anything from Zac that you want to hear about?
Hear about specifically on the offensive line. Did anybody jump out as struggling to you up front? Talked about the pass rush, but was anybody on the offensive line really struggling to keep pace?
Yeah, it was really the interior and specifically coming right from the center. Now, I don't know how much the Mike Munchak wanted Graham Glasgow and Dalton Reisner to help out Patrick Morris, but you could really tell that there was a push up in the middle. The pocket was collapsing from the middle often. And then the right side, guys, Garrett Bowles wasn't jumping out as having, holding after holding or giving up sack after sack. But I do have to say it was the entire offensive line collapsing. And then from the right side, too. Bradley Chubb, Von Miller did some work on Elijah Wilkinson on the right side. There was at least one strip sack and multiple what would have been sacks throughout the rest of practice. And coming off the right side, Drew uncomfortable early and often throughout practice, having to escape the pocket pretty much every other play.
That's really interesting, Zac. There was some reports out there, though, that Garrett Bowles was having a above average practice. Do you agree with that?
It's hard to say because, like I said, there was pressure coming from every single direction. Now, I did notice the right side of the line struggling more than the left side of the line. So maybe comparing it to the rest of the line, Garrett Bowles had a good day. But in general, it's not like Drew Lock could just slide to the left the entire time and just sit there until a receiver got open. No, he was scrambling every way.
All right. Well, you'll take that, I guess. You'll take it. You'll take it from Garrett Bowles. Improvement every day is, of course, what you're looking for in the end. So the defensive side of the ball was all about the pass rush. Some names that maybe we heard day one that I haven't heard you mention yet. Anything impressive from Bryce Callahan, Michael Ojemudia, Bosby, any of the corners out there?
Today what I noticed from that third cornerback spot was a lot of rotation. Like I said, with Patrick Morris at center, I wouldn't be surprised if they're rotating centers every day, not every possession from what we've seen the first 2 days. But today we were seeing a lot of rotation at cornerback with that starting group. Bosby was getting some play, did pretty well. Ojemudia, I did not see him running with the ones often, if at all. And so it was Devontae Harris getting that shot. And I kind of mentioned how he had a good day today going up against Cortland Sutton, had a few PBUs against Sutton early. So wouldn't be surprised to see him get a little more playing time with the ones because of his impressive day today going up against the Broncos' number one receiver right now.
All right. Good to hear.
Zac? One thing that I want to give a shout out to Mace about, or I should say mention for Mace's purposes, is Jeff Driscoll, guys. Yikes. Yeah. Today was not a good day for him. Like I said, just like Drew, there was pressure on Jeff Driscoll, just as there was Brett Rippon today, but he was not making the most of it. He was getting very uncomfortable. It seemed like he was seeing ghosts throughout practice. He was throwing the ball 5 yards off from guys, throwing behind guys, throwing picks. Very much not comfortable there. And that kind of gave me confidence, though, looking at Drew and saying, okay, I'm seeing Jeff Driscoll look like he's getting blitzed all the time and under pressure all the time. And that's what some quarterbacks look like. And then it made me think when I saw Drew under that same amount of pressure, I thought, okay, Drew is handling it a lot better. His footwork looks a lot better than what people expected him to be as an NFL quarterback. He's moving around in the pocket well. He's making decisions well. He's not just scrambling when one guy's there. He's waiting till it's absolutely necessary, then leaving. I like the way he's moving around in the pocket, and that's kind of the bright spot from being under pressure the whole time. But he wasn't able to allow Jerry Jeudy to get open 15 yards downfield. He wasn't able to allow those routes to develop, and that's why we saw one deep pass that was completed from Drew today. It was the one to Sutton near the end of practice, and outside of that, it was Noah Fant on crossers. It was Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon just dumping it out of the backfield. So unfortunately, I didn't get to see Drew show off his talents, but I did like the small things that he did when he was under pressure.
Awesome. Give me a offensive player of the day.
Oh boy. I was actually going to, oh man, this is tough. I was going to knock Cortland Sutton at the beginning of practice because he had 3 drop passes to start practice, but then he just became the consistent target for Drew Lock the rest of practice, made the simple plays that needed to be made, and then of course ended practice with a 50-yard touchdown. So it's funny how he went from trending down in the first 15 minutes of practice to actually ending up being the player of the day on offense.
All right, how about defense?
Oh man, it's so hard to put it to one person. Vic Fangio for calling all those blitzes. I'll go Von Miller because he would have had a strip sack on one play going against Elijah Wilkinson. Made him look silly. Made it look like he was going outside and then cut it in, just threw him off. And, Von would have been there when Drew was holding the ball up. He could have easily swatted the ball down. Maybe just picked it. Little Statue of Liberty for a touchdown for Von if he wanted to. And it's good to see Von be Von.
Love that. There's always a couple every year where Von just takes over. How close were we to a classic Von, Von getting pulled aside and say, hey, man, chill out. We're trying to get some work done on offense today.
It would have had to been the entire defensive pass rush because some guy, Von was pretty much there all the time, but Kareem Jackson coming off blitzes, AJ Johnson coming off blitzes, Jarrell Casey up the middle. They were there before Von a lot of times too. I wouldn't be surprised if Pat Shurmur is pretty upset with Vic Fangio for day 2 bringing all this pressure. But to be fair, it wasn't that they were never bringing 8 guys. It was at most 5 or 6, and they were just getting a lot of pressure on 4 guys often.
Mace, you got anything else for Zach?
Can you actually hear me now?
Yes.
I've tried to talk a few times and I guess you didn't hear me. And I'm like, okay, why am I even here? Jeff Driscoll, how much of it do you think was just like a fail?
Well, I think I know where Mace was going there. I think with Jeff, it was
screw this.
Man, that's what Jeff Driscoll was saying throughout practice too, Ryan. He was not having it, and the pressure was there. And again, I don't want to put it all on him because the pressure was there, Ryan, but I saw how Drew Lock handles pressure and how I wasn't saying, oh my gosh, if there's this pressure this year, they're in trouble. No, I was saying, okay, if there's pressure this year, this offense is not going to be anywhere close to its potential. But Jeff just looked very uncomfortable there. And I don't want to base this off one practice because I wouldn't put Brett Rippon as the 2 right now. But if this continues, you have to give Brett Rippon looks with the 2s. So I'm curious what you see tomorrow, Ryan, when the pads come on and what we see throughout the rest of this week, because I'm not pushing the panic button with Jeff Driscoll right now. But if we get one more week down and we're saying the exact same thing about this and he's having practices like this day in and day out, then yeah, I'm putting Brett Rippon in with the 2s and seeing if he looks a little bit better because boy, it was not good today.
Man, that's tough to hear because you did go out and spend some money on just having a backup quarterback that I know Mace didn't feel comfortable with, but you would assume the Broncos felt pretty comfortable with bringing in Jeff Driscoll being their backup quarterback. Look, I'm a Brett Rippon guy. As I've said on this podcast, some people in the building call him the Drew Lock whisperer. So if he's for sure going to be on the roster, he's going to be that backup quarterback. I'll feel good about that. And if he earns that job, I think that's a good thing. But, you did go and pay for a backup quarterback. You don't want that money just going to waste.
No, yeah, you certainly don't. But I'll end with some good news on the offensive side, Ryan. There was a lot of creativity that I got to see from the Broncos offense today. A lot of pre-snap stuff that I love to see. Jerry Jeudy, like I said, lining up everywhere. Noah Fant doing some stuff. Jerry Jeudy, some pre-snap motion behind Drew Lock, which, I mean, boy, that's exciting to see. So I really liked the creativity coming there from Pat Shurmur, even though you really couldn't do much once the ball was snapped because the blitz was there.
Aside from pass rush and all that, and that's great to hear. Aside from all that stuff, was there anything you were expecting to see today or hoping to see today that you didn't?
Well, I wanted to see this offense utilize what Pat Shurmur was trying to do. He was trying to be creative, and when he took Jerry Jeudy behind Drew Lock in a pre-snap motion, what Drew had to do, he couldn't let the play develop where Courtland Sutton was going deep. He just had to dump it right off to Phillip Lindsay. And so I was really excited coming here to see Jerry Jeudy, see what he can do, see how open he could be, see what Courtland Sutton could do, see what Noah Fant could do. And it just turned out to be a dump down show. And that's not a negative to Drew Lock at all. It's just the offensive line couldn't hold up.
All right. Well, Zach, thank you so much for your observations. Of course, subscribers to thednvr.com will be able to go over and read your full report later today. I'm sure there'll be plenty about the pass rush, but a lot more, maybe of the little details that you find in your notes that aren't top of mind right now. With that being said, we're changing up the format a little bit here today. Last time we went live with the entire podcast, and I think we're going to change it up. From here on out, we'll be going live for the first segment where you'll hear all of our observations from camp. And then we're going to go just to the podcast format for the second and third segments, the questions from the listeners. So if you have questions, of course, you can always become a member at thednvr.com. Leave your questions on the most recent podcast. We'll get to all of them. But this way, we'll get out here, get our observations straight to the people, and then the rest of the podcast will go in podcast form on iTunes or wherever else you listen to podcasts. So that's going to wrap it up for this live portion of the podcast. We'll see you on the other side out in the podcast arena.